Rain pattered softly against the windows of the limousine as Victor Alden, a sharply dressed man with silver hair and the kind of watch that could pay off a small house, sat in the back seat scrolling through his tablet. He was used to attention, business reporters, investors, even the occasional hopeful stranger, but today was different. Today, 3 little girls were following him. It started at the corner of Maple and 9th. He stepped out of the hotel, the driver opened the door, and there they were, standing by the curb, whispering to each other. Their clothes were clean but worn, their hair tied in mismatched ribbons. When he got into the car, they trailed behind on the sidewalk, not running, not shouting, just following. At first, he thought it was coincidence. Maybe they lived nearby. But then, at the next stop, as he stepped into his office building, there they were again, watching from across the street. The eldest, maybe 11, had eyes that didn't blink much, like she was studying him. The smallest clutched a ragged toy rabbit, its fur worn thin. By noon, he was unsettled. People didn't follow Victor Alden. Not without a reason. "Mr. Alden," his assistant whispered, noticing his distracted gaze toward the window. "Are you all right?" "They're outside again," he said flatly. When he left for lunch, the girls crossed the street and began walking behind him. Finally, he stopped and turned. "What do you want?" His tone was sharper than he meant. The eldest stepped forward. "We need your help. Please." Her voice trembled but held a kind of resolve that made him pause. "Help with what?" The middle child, maybe 8 years old, pulled something from her jacket, a photograph, creased and faded. She held it out to him. It was a picture of a smiling woman in a nurse's uniform. His heart skipped. He knew that face. Before he could speak, the eldest girl said, "She's our mother. She's gone. And we think you know why." Victor felt the air thicken around them, the rain suddenly sounding louder against the city pavement. He wanted to hand the picture back, to tell them they were mistaken, but he couldn't. That woman had once saved his life, 15 years ago, in a clinic halfway across the world. He remembered her kindness, and the way she disappeared the night after a fire broke out in the hospital. "How did you find me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. The smallest girl whispered. "She told us, if anything happened, find the man with the silver watch." Victor glanced at his wrist. That watch. The one she had once joked was too shiny for someone so sick. A cold unease gripped him. He had built his empire on secrets and deals most people would never understand, but this was something else. He opened his mouth to ask more, but the eldest girl's eyes darted over his shoulder. "They're here," she said. Before Victor could turn, a black SUV rolled up to the curb, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. The back door cracked open just enough for him to see the glint of something metallic, then it slammed shut. The SUV began to creep forward slowly, almost stalking. The eldest grabbed his hand. "You have to come with us now. They'll hurt you too." Victor, the man who once negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, felt his pulse race like he was cornered prey. They darted into an alley, weaving past overflowing trash bins and dripping fire escapes. The rain was heavier now, blurring the edges of the world. He tried to keep up, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet ground. When they finally stopped, the girls led him through a narrow iron gate into what looked like the back entrance of an old bakery. The smell of yeast and sugar clung to the damp air, but the lights inside were off. The eldest closed the door quickly and slid a wooden bar across it. "This is where she used to bring us when we were little," she whispered. "It's safe for now." Victor stood there, breathless. "Why are people after me?" "They're not after you," the middle child said, placing the photograph on the counter. "They're after what you have. What she gave you." Victor stared at them. "What she gave me? She didn't give me anything." The eldest shook her head slowly. "Yes, she did. Something worth more than all your money. And it's still inside you." Before Victor could speak, a loud knock rattled the door, followed by a voice that was calm but chilling. "Mr. Alden, open up. We know you're in there." The girls froze. The smallest clutched his leg. The voice continued, "You have something that doesn't belong to you. Hand it over, and we'll let them go." Victor's pulse pounded. Them. Not him. The girls. Whoever was outside didn't just know him, they knew them. The eldest leaned toward him, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear, "You can't give it to them. If you do, she'll die for real this time." And then, from somewhere deep in his memory, a flash came back. Her voice, her hand slipping something into his palm as the hospital burned, telling him to never let it fall into the wrong hands. The pounding at the door grew louder. The girls looked at him like he was the only person in the world who could decide what happened next. Victor took a deep breath. "All right," he whispered. "If we're going to survive this, you have to tell me everything she told you." The eldest's eyes glistened. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in layers of paper, and placed it in his hand. It was warm, impossibly warm, like it had a pulse of its own. Outside, footsteps began circling the building. The middle child's voice was barely a breath. "That's the heart key. And they've been looking for it since before you were born." Victor looked down at the small bundle in his palm. He didn't know what the heart key was, but he could feel it humming through his skin, like it recognized him. The eldest girl's face tightened. If they take it, they'll find her. And if they find her, they'll use her to open it. The knocking stopped. Silence fell outside, heavy and dangerous. Then a slow, deliberate scraping sound began on the side wall, as if something sharp was cutting through the brick itself. The sound was unlike anything Victor had heard before, slow, deliberate, and filled with a promise of something terrible waiting on the other side. He felt the vibrations in the walls travel into his bones. The three girls clung to him instinctively, as though he could shield them from whatever was about to come through. He swallowed hard and forced his voice to stay steady. "We need to move. Is there another way out?" The eldest nodded quickly. "There's a trapdoor in the pantry. It leads to the old flour cellar, then to the street 2 blocks over." "But," she hesitated, eyes darting toward the sound of the scraping, "if they've surrounded the building, we might run right into them." The smallest girl tugged at his coat. "But if we stay, they'll come in. They always come in." That sent a cold shiver down his spine. Always. This wasn't the first time these children had been hunted. He looked to the eldest. "Go. Show me the way. Now." She didn't waste another second. She darted toward the pantry door, her younger sisters on her heels. Victor followed, every step echoing in the dim, dust-scented bakery. The air felt thick, as though the walls themselves knew they were being watched. Inside the pantry, shelves sagged under the weight of rusted tins and bags of flour so old they looked fossilized. The eldest girl shoved aside a stack of crates and revealed a square section of floor with an iron ring set into it. She hooked her fingers into the ring and pulled. The trapdoor groaned open, releasing a gust of damp, cool air from below. "In," she urged. Victor crouched, peering into the darkness. The wooden ladder leading down looked as though it hadn't been used in years. The air carried a faint metallic tang, like old water and something faintly electrical. "Go before they..." The eldest didn't finish her sentence. The scraping stopped. Silence again, sharp and oppressive. Then came the whisper. Not from outside, but from somewhere impossibly close, brushing against Victor's ear even though no one stood behind him. "Give me the key, Victor." He spun around so fast he almost toppled over. No one was there. The girls were staring at him, wide-eyed, like they'd heard nothing. "You didn't hear that?" he demanded. The middle child shook her head, but the eldest's face went pale. "They're inside the walls now." Victor didn't ask what she meant. He just climbed down the ladder, one rung at a time, his shoes slipping slightly on the slick wood. The air grew cooler the farther down he went, until it felt like he was stepping into another world. The girls followed quickly, closing the trapdoor above them. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, there was nothing but breathing, theirs and his, until the eldest clicked on a small flashlight she must have kept hidden in her coat. The beam cut through the dark, revealing stone walls and a narrow tunnel leading away from the cellar. The floor was slick with water, and overhead pipes dripped steadily. The sound echoed in the confined space, masking any distant footsteps. Victor's mind was a whirlwind. Questions pressed against his lips, but the urgency in the eldest girl's movements told him this wasn't the time for conversation. Still, he couldn't help it. What is the heart key? Why me? Why now? The eldest didn't look back as she navigated the tunnel. It's not a key like you think. It doesn't open a door. It wakes something. Something only she can control. She. You mean your mother? The middle child spoke this time, her voice trembling. She's not just our mother. She's the guardian. And when she saved you, she made you a part of it too. Victor gripped the strange, warm bundle in his hand. Part of what? The vault, the eldest said. The place where the heart sleeps. They've been trying to find it for years, but they can't without two things, the key and the guardian's blood. Victor felt the weight of her words sink in. Guardian's blood. His mind flashed back to the night of the fire, the chaos in the hospital, the searing pain in his side from shrapnel, and her hands, steady, urgent, working to save him. He remembered her leaning close, whispering something he'd barely registered at the time. A promise. They rounded a bend in the tunnel, and the flashlight beam caught something on the wall. An etching, faint but deliberate. A symbol, a circle with jagged lines radiating from it, like a sun but uneven, broken. The eldest froze. They've been here. How do you know? Victor asked, scanning the wall. She pointed to the center of the symbol, where a small slash had been carved into the stone. That's their mark. It means they're tracking this path. The smallest girl's voice was a whisper. Then they're already in the tunnels. As if summoned by her words, a metallic clang rang out behind them, reverberating through the passageway. The sound of boots on wet stone followed, steady, purposeful, and far too close. Run, the eldest hissed. They bolted down the tunnel, Victor's breath ragged in his chest. The passage seemed to twist and shift, the walls narrowing until his shoulders brushed the damp stone. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as they moved, throwing warped shadows that made the space feel alive. Victor's thoughts flickered in fragments. Why was he still holding the key instead of tossing it and running? Why did he feel, deep down, that giving it up would be worse than death? Why did the warmth in his palm feel like it was syncing with his own heartbeat? The footsteps behind them grew louder, joined by a strange low hum that seemed to seep into the stone. It made the air feel charged, as though the tunnel itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, the eldest yanked them to a halt in front of a heavy iron door embedded in the wall. It looked impossibly old, its hinges thick with rust. This way. She shoved her shoulder against it, gritting her teeth. Victor joined her, his hands pressing against the cold metal. Slowly, painfully, the door groaned open just wide enough for them to squeeze through. They stumbled into a chamber far larger than the tunnel, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. The walls were lined with shelves of crates, jars, and bundles wrapped in oilcloth. In the center of the room stood a massive stone table, its surface carved with the same jagged sun symbol. The middle child pointed at it. This is one of the safe rooms. She brought us here once before. Victor barely had time to take in the space before the pounding started, on the other side of the iron door. Whoever was following them had found it. The eldest looked at Victor with fierce urgency. Put the key on the table. He hesitated. Why? Because if we activate the seal, they can't get in. Victor moved to the table, unwrapping the bundle slowly. Inside was a small, smooth object, no bigger than a walnut, made of something that looked like glass and stone fused together. It glowed faintly, the light pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The moment it touched the table, the carvings lit up in the same rhythm, lines of pale fire racing outward until the entire surface shimmered with light. The pounding on the door stopped instantly. The smallest girl exhaled shakily. It worked. But Victor couldn't take his eyes off the key. What is it really? Why does it feel alive? The eldest's voice was almost reverent. Because it is. It's a piece of the heart itself. And it knows who you are. Victor turned to her sharply. Who I am? I'm a businessman. That's all. She shook her head. No. You're the keeper now. She chose you. And that means, you're part of this fight whether you want to be or not. The glow from the table reflected in their eyes, casting strange shadows on their faces. Somewhere deep in the walls, the low hum returned, louder this time, as if responding to the activation of the seal. Victor had the sinking feeling that the people outside weren't the only ones searching for the heart. Before he could speak, the youngest girl's head jerked toward a dark corner of the room. Someone's here. From the shadows stepped a man Victor didn't recognize. Tall, lean, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the gloom. His eyes glinted unnaturally in the dim light. You've made this very easy for us, the man said softly. Activate the seal, bring out the key. All I had to do was wait. The eldest moved in front of Victor protectively. You're not supposed to be able to get in. The man smiled faintly. Seals keep out those without blood rights. I have them. Victor's stomach turned. You're related to her? Not exactly, the man said, stepping closer. But let's just say, the Guardian's bloodline is more complicated than you think. He extended a hand toward Victor. Give me the key. You can walk away. The children, maybe two, if they're lucky. The glow from the table pulsed faster, the warmth in Victor's hand intensifying as if urging him to decide. The girls were tense, ready to run or fight, but Victor knew neither option was going to save them. Somewhere deep inside, a fragment of memory stirred again, the Guardian's voice, telling him the key would only answer to the Keeper's choice. That if it sensed betrayal, it would burn him from the inside out before letting itself be taken. He tightened his grip. No. The man's expression didn't change, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then you've just chosen the hard way. He moved faster than Victor could follow, but the eldest girl was already reaching for the key with him, her small hand closing over his. The hum in the walls became a roar. The carvings on the table flared blindingly bright, and the floor beneath them trembled as though something massive was waking far below. The tremor deepened, the shelves along the walls rattling violently. Dust poured down from the unseen ceiling, drifting into the bright light spilling from the stone table. The man in the shadows staggered, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the room's energy, but his eyes locked on Victor with renewed hunger. Do you have any idea what you've just done? He demanded, his voice raised over the deafening hum. Victor's heart was hammering. The eldest girl's grip tightened on his hand, and he realized she wasn't holding on for protection, she was anchoring him. Whatever was flowing through the key now was not just light. It was heat, vibration, a pulse that seemed to push his own heartbeat into perfect sync with it. The man took a step forward, and the glow flared brighter, almost like the table itself was reacting to his presence. You're waking it, he said, his tone shifting from anger to a strange mix of awe and dread. You idiot. You're actually waking it. What is it? Victor demanded, his voice shaking. The eldest answered without taking her eyes off the stranger. The heart. The real one. The key is only a piece. The rest is. She broke off, eyes flicking to the far wall. Coming. At first Victor thought she meant the people outside, but then he heard it. No, felt it. A slow, massive thud from beneath the floor. Then another. The sound was too deep to be footsteps, too powerful to be machinery. It was like something alive was pressing upward, answering the key's call. The man in black lunged suddenly, faster than human, but the eldest shoved Victor backward. His hand, still clutching the key, slammed flat against the carved stone table. The instant his palm made full contact, the world exploded in light. The walls dissolved into swirling patterns of gold and shadow, the ceiling stretched upward into infinity, and the floor became a vast disk of stone floating in nothingness. The air shimmered with heat and cold at the same time, and a sound like 1,000 voices whispering at once filled Victor's skull. The 3 girls were still there beside him, their outlines glowing faintly in the strange light. The man was there too, but he had stopped moving entirely, his head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear. Victor staggered back. "What is this? Where are we?" The eldest's voice was calm, almost reverent. "Inside the seal's realm. Only the keeper can open it. Only the keeper can wake the heart." "And you brought him here," the man said, his voice echoing unnaturally. He took a slow step toward them, each movement sending ripples across the stone floor. "Perfect. Now hand it over before you don't have a body to go back to." Victor looked around frantically. "How do I get us out of here?" "You don't," the eldest said quietly. "Not until it chooses." The whispers grew louder, wrapping around Victor's thoughts like tendrils of smoke. Some of the voices were sharp, urgent. Others sounded curious, almost gentle. He realized with a start that they weren't speaking in any language he recognized, yet he understood them. "Keeper. You hold the shard. The heart waits. The choice must be made." "I don't know what to choose," Victor shouted into the shimmering air. "I don't even know what this is." The man's eyes narrowed. "Choose me. Give me the key, and I'll show you what real power looks like." Victor turned to the girls. "Why me? Why not you, if you're her daughters?" The eldest's gaze softened. "Because she saw what you would become. You've lived in their world and ours. You can make a choice neither side expects. That's why she saved you." The man barked a laugh, the sound twisting into something inhuman halfway through. "She saved him because she was desperate. You think a dying woman handing off a trinket is destiny? Pathetic." Victor's grip on the key tightened. The warmth had grown hotter, not painfully so, but with an intensity that made his arm tremble. The whispers surged again. "Keeper. Will you guard the heart? Or will you release it?" He didn't answer right away. His mind was a storm. Memories of the Guardian, her steady hands, her whispered warning, the strange way the girls had found him, the SUV in the rain, the voices that knew his name without him speaking it. And beneath all of it, a question he couldn't shake. What happens if I say no? The man stepped closer. "You've built empires, Victor. You know what happens when you hold something the world wants. You use it. You don't hide it. You don't protect it. You turn it into power." The eldest moved between them again, her voice steady. "If you give it to him, the heart will open for destruction. It will burn everything to ash, and there will be no one left to rebuild." The floor trembled under their feet. The light dimmed for a moment, then surged, blinding in its brilliance. From the endless space above, something began to descend, a vast shape of light and shadow, pulsing with the same rhythm as the key in his hand. It wasn't solid, yet it had weight. It wasn't alive, yet it was aware. The air grew heavy as it lowered toward the stone disk, and Victor's knees nearly buckled under the force pressing down on him. The man's face split into a hungry smile. "There it is." The girls dropped to their knees instinctively, their heads bowed. The whispers ceased entirely, replaced by a silence so absolute it roared in Victor's ears. The shape halted above the table, its edges shifting like liquid fire. A voice, not in his head this time, but resonating through the very space they stood in, spoke. "Keeper." Victor's throat was dry. "Yes. The shard you hold is mine. You carry it by the Guardian's will. Tell me, why should you keep it?" Every instinct in him screamed to step back, to throw the key down and run. But there was nowhere to run to, and somehow he knew that answering wrong was worse than saying nothing. "I don't know if I should keep it," he said slowly. "I don't even know what it can do. But I know the people chasing us want it for something terrible. And I think she trusted me to stop that." The great shape seemed to shift, folding in on itself, as though studying him. "Trust is not protection. Many are trusted, few are worthy." Victor swallowed. "Then test me." The man in black stepped forward sharply. This is absurd. The guardian is dead, and the keeper is mine to command. Give me the shard, and I'll prove worth faster than this fool ever could. The voice grew colder. You have no claim. The man's expression twisted. I have blood rights. That's more than he does. The heart's voice rumbled through the space. Blood without purpose is wasted. You would destroy. He would decide. Victor's pulse thundered in his ears. Decide what? What did they want from him? The eldest looked up, her voice urgent. You have to tell it what you'll do with the key. That's the test. He looked from her to the man, then back to the shimmering shape above. The hum of its power vibrated in his bones. I'll keep it safe, he said finally. I don't know how yet, but I'll learn. And I won't let it be used to hurt people. Not by them, not by me. The silence stretched. The man's hands curled into fists. Then the heart's light flared so brightly Victor had to shut his eyes. Then you will bear the keeper's mark. Before he could react, heat seared into his palm where the key rested. He gasped, the sensation half agony, half something deeper, like the burn of truth sinking into his skin. When he opened his eyes again, the key was gone, absorbed into his hand. A faint, intricate pattern now glowed across his palm, shifting like liquid metal. The man's snarl broke the heavy stillness. You've just doomed yourself. The heart's voice thundered once more. He is keeper. You are nothing. The man moved then, fast, furious, but before he could reach them, the entire space cracked like glass. The infinite ceiling shattered, the stone disk splintered, and the roaring light swallowed them whole. When Victor's vision cleared, they were back in the chamber beneath the bakery. The stone table was dark now, its carvings dull and lifeless. The man was gone, as if he'd never been there. The iron door stood closed, silent on the other side. Victor stared at his glowing palm. What just happened? The eldest stood slowly, her face unreadable. You passed. The middle child's eyes were on his hand. Now they'll never stop coming for you. The smallest one slipped her tiny fingers into his free hand, her grip surprisingly strong. But we won't either. Victor looked at each of them, then at the sealed door. Somewhere beyond it, in the tunnels or the streets above, he knew the hunt hadn't stopped, it had only changed. And deep in his bones, beneath the shock and fear, a truth had settled. Whatever the heart was, whatever it could do, he was tied to it now in a way he couldn't undo. The hum he'd felt in the realm still lingered faintly in the air, like an echo waiting to return. And for the first time since the girls had found him, Victor realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what came next. Victor stood in the dim chamber, the silence pressing in around them like the weight of deep water. The glow in his palm had dulled slightly, but it was still there, shifting faintly under his skin, as if it were alive. He couldn't stop staring at it. It didn't feel like an injury, didn't throb like a burn. It was something else entirely, a connection that was more than physical. The eldest girl broke the quiet. We can't stay here. The seal bought us time, but it's not permanent. They'll find another way in. He looked toward the iron door, half expecting it to start shaking again, but it remained still. How long do we have? Minutes. Maybe an hour if we're lucky, she replied, already scanning the walls for another exit. Victor's mind was spinning. He wanted answers, demanded them even, but there was no space for that right now. Every instinct told him that whatever had just happened, it had shifted the balance. The man in black wasn't the only one hunting them, he could feel it. The moment the heart had marked him, a signal had gone out, something beyond sound or sight, calling to those who wanted it. The middle child had moved to the far wall, crouching low. She ran her fingers along the base until they found a seam in the stone. With a quiet grunt, she pushed, and a narrow section of the wall swung inward, revealing a tight passage that smelled faintly of earth and oil. This way, she said. Victor followed, ducking his head to enter. The space was so narrow he could barely turn his shoulders, and the uneven floor forced them to move in a careful single file. The walls were slick in places, crumbling in others, and the darkness seemed to press in like something alive. "How far does this go?" he asked, his voice low. "To the river," the eldest answered from ahead. "If the water levels haven't risen, there's a dry platform where we can cross to the old station. From there," she hesitated, "we'll figure it out." Victor didn't like the uncertainty, but he said nothing. The air grew cooler as they moved, the dampness deepening until he could hear faint dripping somewhere ahead. The faint glow from his palm illuminated the walls just enough to see the rough stone. After several minutes, the passage widened slightly, and they emerged into a tunnel that looked far older than the bakery chamber. The stones here were worn smooth, the mortar crumbling away in places. Rusted tracks ran along the floor, remnants of some forgotten rail system. The youngest girl spoke for the first time since they'd left the seal chamber. "I don't like it here. It feels loud." Victor paused, frowning. "Loud? I don't hear anything." The eldest glanced back at him. "She means the echoes. This place remembers too much." Before he could ask what that meant, the tunnel ahead curved sharply, and the sound of water became louder. The air shifted, bringing with it the smell of the river, mud, oil, and the faint metallic tang of old steel. When they rounded the bend, Victor saw the platform. It jutted out over the black water, supported by corroded beams that looked like they could crumble if someone breathed too hard. The tracks ended abruptly at the edge, vanishing into the current. The eldest pointed to the far side. "There's another platform across. That's where the station is." Victor looked at the water between. "And how exactly do we get across?" "The old way." She moved to a rusted control panel near the edge, brushing away a layer of grime. "If it still works, there's a trolley." She stopped abruptly, her head snapping up. "What is it?" Victor asked, his gut tightening. "They're here," she said simply. From the darkness behind them, faint shapes began to emerge. First shadows, then figures, their outlines blurring as though they weren't entirely part of this world. They moved without sound, without weight, yet each step seemed to make the air heavier. Victor's grip tightened instinctively, even though he had nothing to fight with but his hands. "What are they?" The middle child's voice was hushed, almost reverent. "The shades. They follow the heart's scent." There were more of them now, a dozen at least, blocking the path they'd come from. Their faces were indistinct, shifting constantly, but their eyes, or the spaces where eyes should have been, locked on Victor's glowing palm. The eldest spun to the panel, yanking down a rusted lever. The grinding sound that followed was deafening, metal on metal as something deep below began to move. Across the water, a small platform appeared from the shadows, suspended by thick chains. It swayed slightly as it moved toward them, creaking with each pull. "Hurry," she urged. The shades began to move faster, their steps fluid and unnatural. Victor stepped in front of the youngest, who clung to his coat, her wide eyes fixed on the approaching shapes. "They can't touch you," the eldest said without looking back, "but they can take you." "That's not reassuring," Victor muttered, keeping his eyes on them. The trolley reached the platform with a heavy thud, the chains groaning in protest. It was barely large enough for the four of them, but they climbed on quickly. The eldest yanked another lever, and the trolley began its slow retreat to the other side. The shades reached the edge as they pulled away. One leaned forward, its face, or what passed for it, stretching toward Victor, its form elongating unnaturally. He felt a sudden pull in his chest, as though something inside him was being drawn out. Instinctively, he pressed his palm to his chest, the key's mark flaring in response. The pull stopped instantly, and the shade recoiled, its shape rippling violently before it vanished entirely. The eldest glanced at him. "You felt that?" "Felt like they were trying to tear something out of me," he said, still shaken. "They were," she replied grimly. "If they get the keeper's spirit, the key dies with you." Victor didn't ask what happened after that. The trolley reached the far side, and they stepped off onto the second platform. It led directly into a long, low corridor of brick and steel, the old station. The air here was thick with the smell of rust and mildew. Faded posters clung to the walls, their edges curled, the words barely legible. A row of shattered ticket windows lined one side, and a staircase at the far end led upward into darkness. "This place hasn't been used in decades," Victor observed, his voice echoing softly. "That's why it's safe," the eldest replied. "No one looks here anymore." They moved quickly through the station, their footsteps the only sound until a faint scraping echoed from somewhere above. The middle child froze, tilting her head. "That's not a shade," she whispered. Victor's gut tightened. "Then what is it?" The eldest's voice was low. "A hunter." She picked up the pace, urging them toward a side door that led into a narrow maintenance corridor. The walls here were close again, pipes running overhead, some dripping steadily. The glow in Victor's palm pulsed faster, as if reacting to something unseen. They reached another set of stairs, these leading down. The eldest pushed the door open at the bottom, revealing a small room lined with shelves of tools and supplies. "We'll rest here," she said, closing the door behind them. "Not long. Just enough to decide our next move." Victor leaned against the wall, his breath still uneven. "You keep saying next move like we're playing a game of chess. But I don't even know the rules." The eldest met his gaze. "The rules are simple. Keep moving. Stay ahead of them. Don't let the heart fall into the wrong hands. Everything else, you learn as you go." The youngest curled up on the floor, her head resting on her knees. The middle child sat beside her, but her eyes never left Victor's glowing palm. "They'll keep finding us," she said quietly. "Until the end." Victor didn't respond immediately. He stared at the faint shifting pattern under his skin, feeling the quiet hum it gave off. It wasn't just an object, it was a presence. And it was waiting for something. "If you want, I can keep going from here without breaking tone or pace for another 4,000 words, maintaining the tension and mystery while expanding the chase, the hunters, and the deeper lore of the heart. Would you like me to?" The hum in his palm was steady now, like a living heartbeat pressed beneath the skin, faint but insistent. It made the quiet in the maintenance room feel deceptive, a calm surface over deep, unseen currents. Victor's breathing slowed, but his mind didn't. Every instinct he'd honed in boardrooms and negotiations told him that stillness like this never lasted. The eldest girl crouched by the door, one ear pressed to the cold metal, her body tense but controlled. She didn't seem afraid so much as calculating, listening for patterns in the silence beyond. The middle child was fiddling with a small object in her hands, what looked like a broken wristwatch, its face cracked, gears exposed. The youngest had stopped trembling, but her gaze was distant, as though she was listening to something only she could hear. Victor broke the quiet. "Who was he?" The eldest didn't look back. "Which one?" "The man in black. In the chamber." Her voice stayed level, but he caught the smallest flicker in her tone. "One of the blood-marked. They're not guardians, but they've been altered by the heart's power. They think it gives them a right to it." Victor frowned. "Altered how?" The middle child looked up from the broken watch. "They can survive places others can't. Move in ways they shouldn't. And they don't stop." It was the kind of answer that made his stomach knot. "How many of them are there?" The eldest's silence was answer enough. Victor rubbed at his glowing palm, feeling the warmth spread faintly into his wrist. "And they're after me now because you're the keeper," she said, cutting him off. "The mark binds you to the heart, and that means every blood-marked will feel it. Even the ones who don't know why yet." The youngest spoke then, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some of them used to be like her." She didn't clarify who her was, but Victor didn't need it spelled out. "The guardian. Their mother." The eldest pushed away from the door. "We can't stay. The hunter's still upstairs. If we wait too long, it will scent us." "Hunter?" Victor asked. "Not blood-marked. Worse." The way she said it left no room for argument. She led them to the far side of the room, where a low vent sat against the wall. The grate was rusted but loose, and she pried it away with practiced ease. A cold draft seeped from the darkness beyond. "This will take us into the old air tunnels," she said. "They're dangerous, but less dangerous than what's above." Victor ducked to look inside. The shaft was barely wide enough for him to crawl through. The walls were lined with corroded metal, rivets jutting like teeth. "How far?" "A mile, maybe less. It'll open into the lower docks. And from there, we find someone who can hide you." Victor caught the slip. "You, not us." But he didn't press it. They moved single file again, the eldest going first, the youngest directly in front of him, the middle girl last to close the grate behind them. The air inside was dry but tasted faintly of rust and something electrical. The only light came from his palm and the occasional sliver of it seeping through old seams in the metal. The sound of their movement echoed strangely, not in a hollow way, but in a muted rhythm that made Victor feel as though the tunnel itself was listening. Every scrape of his shoe, every slow exhale, seemed to sink into the walls. Halfway through, the youngest stopped abruptly. Victor whispered, "What is it?" She didn't answer at first. Then, "Something's in the tunnel." He glanced ahead at the eldest. She had frozen too, head tilted slightly. Then he heard it, a faint metallic tap, like nails or claws on the wall. The sound came from somewhere ahead, moving slowly toward them. "Back," the eldest ordered softly. Quietly. They began inching backward, but the space was too tight to move quickly without noise. The tapping grew louder, faster, and Victor's skin prickled with a warning he couldn't name. "Go," the eldest hissed. The middle girl shoved the grate open behind them, and they spilled out into a pitch-black service corridor that smelled of stagnant water. She slammed the grate shut just as something hit it from the other side. Once, twice. The metal rang sharply, bending inward slightly with each impact. "What was that?" Victor asked, his voice low but urgent. The eldest's expression was grim. "A crawler. They track warmth. The key's glow would have drawn it." Victor's hand tightened involuntarily. "And if it caught us?" The middle child's eyes were flat. "You'd still be alive. You just wouldn't be. You." The grate shuddered again, but the thing didn't try to push through. After a moment, the sound of claws scraping away into the tunnel faded. The eldest turned to the corridor ahead. "This way. And stay close. Crawlers don't always give up." They moved through the service passage, the floor slick beneath their feet. The air grew damper as they went, until the sound of water lapping against stone reached them. The corridor opened into a cavernous space beneath the city, a half-flooded chamber where old wooden docks jutted into black water. Rusting boats bobbed faintly in the current, their hulls groaning. Chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying slightly despite the still air. The eldest scanned the shadows. "She used to meet someone here. If he's still alive." She didn't finish. "Someone who can help us?" Victor asked. The middle child answered instead. "Someone who owes her a debt." Before Victor could ask what kind of debt, a voice drifted from the darkness. "If you're here to collect, you're late." A figure emerged from between two boats, tall and thin, his coat heavy with water stains, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He carried a lantern that flickered with a strange green light. The eldest stepped forward. "We need safe passage." He tilted his head. "And why would I risk my skin for strangers?" "You're not risking it for strangers," she said evenly. "You're repaying it to her." Something in the man's posture shifted. He studied them for a long moment, then let out a low breath. "If she sent you, it must be bad." "She didn't send us," the eldest said quietly. "She's gone." The man's grip on the lantern tightened. "Gone or taken?" Victor spoke for the first time. "Missing. And now they're after her children. And me." The green light flickered in the man's eyes as he looked at Victor. "You've got the mark." Victor glanced down at his palm. "So I've been told." "That's not a blessing," the man said, turning toward one of the boats. It's a beacon. We know, the eldest replied. The man stepped onto the boat, gesturing for them to follow. Then let's move before someone else answers it. Victor hesitated at the edge, staring at the black water. Where does this go? Somewhere the hunters don't like to follow, the man said. For now. The eldest was already climbing aboard, the middle and youngest close behind. Victor followed, the wood creaking under his weight. The man untied the boat and pushed them away from the dock, the lantern casting green ripples across the water. They moved in silence for a time, the oars dipping soundlessly into the current. The air grew colder, the darkness around them deeper. Victor could feel the hum in his palm again, stronger now, as if responding to the place they were entering. Finally he asked, "Where exactly are we going?" The man didn't look at him. "To someone who can tell you what you're holding, and what it's already started." Victor's fingers closed over the faintly glowing mark. He didn't know what unsettled him more, that the key might be starting something, or that it might already be too late to stop it. The man's voice was low, almost lost to the water's whisper. "Just remember, once you learn the truth, you don't get to walk away from it." Victor didn't answer. Somewhere deep beneath the black water, he thought he felt something stir. The oars moved with a slow, measured rhythm, their sound swallowed by the dense black water. The green glow from the lantern made everything appear otherworldly, the man's gaunt face, the rippling surface beneath them, even the children's eyes, which reflected that light like shards of glass. Victor kept glancing down at his palm. The glow there was brighter than before, its warmth turning into a steady throb. He could feel it pulsing in time with his heartbeat, almost as if it were part of him now. He hated it. Hated the way it seemed to be making decisions without him, pulling him toward something he didn't understand. The youngest girl had curled into herself, but her eyes never left the water. The middle one sat still, her broken watch turning in her hands. The eldest stared ahead with a focus so sharp it could cut stone. She was bracing for something, and Victor could feel it too, in the way the air seemed charged, thick with a pressure that had nothing to do with the weather. The boat slid into a narrow channel between walls of jagged rock. The man with the lantern finally broke the silence. "She's waiting ahead." Victor frowned. "She?" The man didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the dark slit of passage in front of them, where the walls seemed to lean in close, as if trying to listen. The green glow began to fade, swallowed by a faint silvery shimmer that seemed to bleed from the rock itself. When they emerged on the other side, Victor felt the change instantly. The air was warmer, scented faintly with something metallic and floral at the same time. The cavern here was vast, its roof lost in shadows, its center dominated by a small island of pale stone. A single figure stood there, waiting. She was dressed in a long coat the color of deep night, her hair the white of frost, though her face looked far from old. Her eyes, impossibly bright, fixed on Victor the moment the boat scraped against the island's edge. "You brought him," she said to the boatman, though her voice carried easily to all of them. "He's marked," the man replied simply. "I know." The eldest girl helped her sisters out of the boat. Victor followed, though every step toward the woman made the heat in his palm surge. "You're the keeper," she said, studying him as if he were a specimen on a table. "Do you know what that means?" Victor swallowed. "Not really." Her gaze flicked to the girls. "And yet you came with them. That's either bravery or desperation." "Both," Victor said. A faint smile touched her lips. "The heart doesn't choose at random, you know. It calls to those who have something left to lose." Victor thought of the life he had built, the empire he'd clawed from nothing. But those were only numbers and steel. What struck him harder was the thought of these children, their mother missing, hunters closing in, and the fact that he had already decided he couldn't just walk away from them. "What does it want from me?" he asked. The woman stepped closer, her boots making no sound on the stone. "It wants what it always wants. To be carried, protected, delivered to where it can wake again. And if I refuse?" Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes hardened. Then it will still get there. It will just leave a trail of ruin behind it, through you. Victor felt the weight of those words settle like a stone in his chest. And the hunters? They're drawn to its pulse. The blood-marked crave its power. The crawlers crave its warmth. And there are worse things still. The youngest girl finally spoke, her voice soft but certain. It's alive. The woman didn't deny it. Alive in a way you can't yet understand. But it knows when it's in danger. That's why it marked you. You've already survived things others wouldn't. Victor thought about the years of ruthless competition, the betrayals, the nights spent planning 10 moves ahead just to stay afloat. Maybe she was right. So what now? He asked. Now, the woman said, you choose whether to run from it, or walk into the storm and end it before it begins. The middle girl looked up. You mean find it a new keeper? The woman's gaze was unreadable. Or destroy it. A sharp pulse went through Victor's hand, and he realized the thought of destroying it made the mark burn, almost as if it understood and rejected the idea. The boatman stepped onto the island, his face grim. If you're going to make that choice, you'd better do it fast. The tide's turning. It wasn't just the tide. The air was shifting, heavy with a low vibration that came from everywhere at once. The girls froze. The woman's hand moved to the hilt of a blade strapped to her side. They've found us, she said. From the black water beyond the island, shapes began to rise. Slender, moving wrong, their limbs too long, their heads smooth and featureless. Water streamed off their bodies in slow rivulets. Victor recognized the sound they made, the same tapping he'd heard in the tunnels. Crawlers. But behind them, on the farthest edge of the light, came something taller, broader, draped in black. Its presence seemed to crush the air around it. The blood-marked. The one from the chamber. The woman turned to Victor. It's not going to stop until it has the heart. You can hand it over, or you can use it. How do I? No time for questions. She thrust a small dagger into his free hand. Your mark will tell you what to do. The eldest girl was already pulling her sisters behind her, a shard of broken wood gripped like a weapon. The boatman swung his lantern, the green flame flaring brighter. The crawlers hissed at the light but didn't retreat. Victor's palm was blazing now, the glow spilling up his arm. He could feel something inside him, something not entirely his, urging him forward. He tightened his grip on the dagger and stepped to the edge of the island. The first crawler lunged. He didn't think. He just moved, thrusting the glowing hand out. A shockwave erupted from his palm, rippling the air, slamming the creature backward into the water. Steam hissed where it landed. The others paused, uncertain, their faceless heads tilting toward him. The blood-marked didn't pause. It stepped onto the island, each movement deliberate, its shadow stretching unnaturally far. Victor met its gaze, or the place where its eyes should have been, and felt a pressure in his skull, like hands trying to pry into his thoughts. The mark on his palm flared in answer, pushing back. He understood then. The heart wasn't just a burden. It was a weapon. With a surge of heat, he moved toward the blood-marked. The air between them crackled. The figure raised an arm, its hand twisting unnaturally, but Victor drove forward, the dagger slicing through the space between them. Light erupted, not from the blade, but from his hand, blinding, searing. The blood-marked staggered, its shadow writhing. The crawlers screamed, their forms dissolving into the water. When the light faded, the blood-marked was gone. Only the scent of scorched stone remained. Victor stood panting, the glow in his palm dimming but not gone. The woman watched him, her expression unreadable. You've made your choice, she said quietly. Victor looked at the girls, shaken, but alive. He nodded. I'm not running. The boatman's voice was low. Then you'll need to go where the heart wants to go. And that's deeper than any of us have dared. The woman stepped forward, placing her hand briefly over his. It will lead you. But know this, every step you take will wake things that should never wake. Victor didn't flinch. Then I guess we don't stop walking. Somewhere in the dark beneath the water, something shifted, as if answering him. The girls drew closer. The woman turned toward the far side of the cavern, where a narrow black passage waited. And without another word, they stepped into it, the glow from his palm casting their shadows long against the stone, walking toward a storm only they could feel building, one that promised to either end them, or change the world forever.